The crystal chandelier above the dining table cast dancing shadows across my grandmother's face as she raised her champagne flute. 72 years old today, and Patricia Montgomery looked every bit the steel magnolia. She'd always been silver hair, perfectly coiffed, pearls at her throat, that knowing smile playing at her lips. The private dining room at Russo's was packed with family, the air thick with expensive perfume and unspoken tension. I smoothed my dress under the table, trying to ignore the way my older sister Madison kept glancing at me from across the room. She'd been acting strange all evening, her usual condescending smirks replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. Our stepmother Jessica sat beside her, wine glass clutched too tightly in her manicured fingers. Uncle Richard, Dad's brother and self-appointed family financial advisor, had barely touched his steak. Something was off. I could feel it in my bones. "Emma, darling," grandmother's voice cut through the ambient chatter like a knife through silk. The entire table fell silent. "I've been meaning to ask you something." My stomach tightened. When Patricia Montgomery announced she had a question, it was never just a question. It was a chess move. "Of course, Grandma," I managed, setting down my fork. She tilted her head, that smile growing wider. "How are you enjoying the sapphire necklace I sent over? The one for your engagement?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "I'm sorry, what?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "What engagement? What necklace?" Grandmother's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose. "The Cartier sapphire, dear. The one that's been in our family for 3 generations. Your great-grandmother wore it on her wedding day. I wore it on mine." She looked genuinely confused now. "Madison delivered it to you 6 months ago. I specifically told her it was for when you finally got engaged. I thought you and David were planning to announce something tonight?" David, my boyfriend of 3 years who'd broken up with me 8 months ago via text message, the boyfriend my family knew about. Madison made a sound like she was choking on her wine. Jessica's face had gone from perfectly bronzed to the color of old parchment. Uncle Richard was suddenly very interested in his phone. "Grandma, I never received any necklace," I said slowly, my mind racing. "Madison never gave me anything, and David and I broke up almost a year ago." The silence that followed was suffocating. I watched my cousin Tyler, sitting at the far end of the table, subtly pull out his phone and start recording. He caught my eye and gave the tiniest nod. My heart started hammering against my ribs. "Madison?" Grandmother's voice had gone from warm to arctic. "Would you care to explain?" My sister's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Grandma, I can explain. There was a misunderstanding. The necklace, it needed to be reappraised for insurance purposes. And Uncle Richard said, "Don't you dare drag me into this," Richard snapped, but his voice cracked. Grandmother set down her champagne flute with a sharp clink. "Emma, that necklace is worth approximately $400,000. It was to be yours, as the youngest granddaughter, as per family tradition." She turned to Madison. "Where is my necklace?" "We sold it," Jessica blurted out, then immediately looked like she wanted to sink through the floor. The room erupted. Dad jumped to his feet. My aunt started asking what was happening. Younger cousins looked around in confusion, but I couldn't move. I felt like I'd been turned to stone. "You sold it?" I heard myself say. "You sold my necklace?" "It wasn't technically yours yet," Madison said weakly, but there was a note of her old defensiveness creeping in. "And Emma, you have to understand, Richard said there were tax implications, estate issues. We were trying to help Grandma manage her assets." "By stealing from your sister?" Dad's voice was strangled. "It wasn't just the necklace," Tyler said quietly from his end of the table. Every head swiveled toward him. He'd stopped recording and was now looking at me with something like pity. "Emma, I think you need to know something. I've been keeping track. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner, but I wasn't sure, and then I was afraid, and—" "Tyler, what are you talking about?" I demanded. He took a deep breath. "The jewelry isn't all that's missing. Last year, after Grandma's stroke, Madison and Jessica convinced her to let them organize her finances. They said they were helping. But I have access to some of the family accounts because I help Grandma with her computer stuff, and I started noticing things." Grandmother had gone very still, her face unreadable. "Continue, Tyler." 3 of Grandma's rental properties were sold in the last 8 months. The deeds show they went for market value, almost $2.2 million total, but the money didn't go into Grandma's accounts. It went into something called Montgomery Asset Holdings LLC. That's a legitimate estate planning vehicle, Richard said quickly. Too quickly. I set it up to protect Patricia's assets from tax liability. It's all above board. Then why? Tyler continued, pulling up something on his phone. Does the LLC list Jessica and Madison as the primary beneficiaries? And why have there been withdrawals totaling nearly $300,000 in the last 6 months to pay off debts registered to Madison's name? I felt like I was underwater, drowning in information I couldn't quite process. Madison had debt? Jessica was involved in Grandma's estate planning? Since when? Those properties, I said slowly, pieces clicking into place. The ones on Riverside? Grandma, you always said those would eventually come to me and Madison to split. You said they were our inheritance. They were, Grandmother said, her voice dangerously quiet. They still should be. This is absurd. Jessica stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. Patricia, you know you signed those papers. You approved the estate restructuring. You were having memory issues after the stroke, and we were just trying to protect you and protect the family assets. Emma wasn't even around. She was too busy with her little marketing job to help. The casual cruelty of that statement hit me like a slap. I'd been working 60-hour weeks, climbing my way up from junior associate to manager, sending money home when Dad had been sick, checking in on Grandma every week via video call because I lived 3 hours away. I'd been building my life, not neglecting my family. I was working, I said, my voice shaking with anger I'd been suppressing for years. I was building a career. I wasn't avoiding anything. You want to know why I wasn't here more? Because every time I came home, Madison made sure to remind me I wasn't the golden child, that I wasn't successful enough, pretty enough, married enough, that I was a disappointment. That's not, Madison started. Don't. I cut her off. Don't you dare. How long have you been planning this? Since Grandma's stroke? Before that? Was that why you suddenly started being so helpful, so attentive? You saw an opportunity, didn't you? Madison's face crumpled, and for a moment, she looked like she might cry. You don't understand what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. You've always been Grandma's favorite, the sweet one, the one who could do no wrong. Do you know what it's like to live in your shadow? To watch everyone fawn over Emma this, Emma that? I have a master's degree. I ran a department at my firm, and still, all anyone asked about was when you were coming to visit. The raw pain in her voice caught me off guard. For a second, just a second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the $400,000 necklace, the properties, the lies. So you stole from me? I asked. You stole from your own grandmother because you felt overlooked? I borrowed against future assets, Madison said, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. You forged documents, Tyler interjected. He was looking at his phone again. Emma, I saved some PDFs from Grandma's email before they could be deleted. There are papers with your signature on them, authorizing the property sales and the transfer of jewelry items to Madison for safekeeping. Did you sign anything like that? No, I said immediately. I've never signed anything related to Grandma's estate except her birthday cards. They're forgeries then, Grandmother said flatly. Richard, I assume you facilitated this? You had access to enough of Emma's information to forge her signature? Uncle Richard's face had gone from nervous to panicked. Patricia, you have to understand, the estate was complicated. There were tax implications. If the assets had stayed in your name, if you're about to tell me you committed fraud and theft for tax purposes, Richard, I suggest you stop talking immediately, Grandmother said. She pulled out her own phone, her fingers moving with surprising speed. I've been many things in my life, but I have never been anyone's fool, and I especially will not be made a fool of by my own family. Grandma, who are you calling? I asked. My attorney, she said crisply. And then the FBI. Madison went white. The FBI? Grandma, don't you think that's a bit extreme? We can work this out as a family. We can. You stole from me. You forged legal documents. You sold properties that weren't yours to sell and pocketed the money. This isn't a family matter anymore, Madison. This is fraud. This is theft. This is conspiracy. Grandmother's voice never rose above conversational level, but there was steel in every syllable. And Emma, I am so deeply sorry that I didn't see this sooner. I couldn't speak. My throat had closed up with too many emotions: anger, betrayal, vindication, grief for the sister I'd thought I had and apparently never did. I want my lawyer here within the hour, Grandmother continued into her phone. And yes, please contact the Financial Crimes Division. I'll need to file a formal report. She paused. Yes, I understand this will likely result in arrests. That's the point. Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. You're going to have your own family arrested? On your birthday? I'm going to have thieves arrested, Grandmother corrected. The fact that they share my DNA is unfortunate, but it doesn't grant them immunity from consequences. The next 20 minutes were chaos. Madison started crying in earnest, begging Grandma to reconsider. Jessica tried to leave but found Dad blocking the door, his face a mask of barely controlled fury at what his brother and new wife had done. Uncle Richard made a few half-hearted attempts to justify the accounting before Tyler pulled up more documents on his laptop, documents that showed a years-long pattern of small thefts and manipulations that had escalated after side. Grandmother's stroke. I sat frozen in my chair, watching my family implode like a building demolition in slow motion. Cousins were taking sides. My aunt was screaming at Richard. Someone knocked over a wine bottle, and no one moved to clean it up. Tyler slid into the empty chair next to me. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking maybe I was wrong, maybe there was a legitimate explanation. And then I was scared. Madison threatened me once, said if I told anyone about what I'd seen in the accounts, she'd make sure I was cut out of everything. Said no one would believe me anyway. How long have you known? I asked. About 6 months. I started noticing about a year ago, right after Grandma's stroke, but I thought maybe it was just reorganization like they said. Then I saw the property sales and the money not going where it should, and I started keeping copies of everything I could access. He pulled out a flash drive. It's all here. Bank statements, emails, the LLC documents, everything. I made sure to date stamp and back everything up to cloud storage too. Why? I asked. Why go through all that trouble? Tyler gave me a sad smile. Because you've always been kind to me, Emma. When everyone else treated me like the weird tech nerd cousin, you actually listened when I talked about my interests. You came to my college graduation when your sister forgot. You're good people. And what they were doing to you, to Grandma, it was wrong. Someone had to stand up to them eventually. I grabbed his hand and squeezed. Thank you. The attorney arrived first. A sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with an expensive briefcase and the air of someone who'd seen everything twice. She spent 10 minutes conferring with Grandmother and Tyler, reviewing documents on his laptop, her expression growing progressively darker. Then the FBI agents walked in. There were 2 of them, a man and a woman, both in dark suits, both with badges that they held up for exactly 2 seconds before launching into business mode. The woman, Agent Morrison, went straight to Grandmother. The man, Agent Chen, surveyed the room with the kind of calm assessment that made everyone immediately shut up. Mrs. Montgomery, Agent Morrison said, we received your call. Can you walk me through what you've discovered? Watching my grandmother methodically lay out the case against her own granddaughter, her daughter-in-law, and her brother-in-law was surreal. She didn't cry. She didn't waver. She simply presented facts, dates, amounts, documents, witness statements. Tyler pulled up files on his laptop. The attorney added legal context. I provided confirmation that my signature had been forged. Agent Chen interviewed me separately, in a quiet corner of the dining room. Miss Cooper, I need you to look at these documents and tell me if you recognize your signature. I looked at the papers he spread out on the table. There were 3 property deeds, 2 bank authorization forms, and a document titled Transfer of Personal Assets for Estate Planning Purposes. Every single one had my name signed at the bottom in handwriting that looked remarkably like mine but wasn't quite right. The E in Emma was too loopy. The C in Cooper had the wrong slant. These aren't my signatures, I said. They're good forgeries, but they're not mine. Can you prove that? I pulled out my wallet and extracted my driver's license, a credit card, and a check I'd written to my landlord just yesterday that I hadn't mailed yet. You can compare these. I can also provide handwriting samples going back years if you need them. I've kept journals since high school. Agent Chen took photos of everything with his phone. We'll need those journals. And we'll need you to come in tomorrow to give a full statement and provide official handwriting samples for the lab. Am I in trouble? I asked, the reality of the situation finally hitting me. For the documents, even though I didn't sign them? You're the victim, Miss Cooper, he said gently. You're not in trouble, but we will need your cooperation to build the case. Across the room, I watched as Agent Morrison stood in front of Madison, Jessica, and Richard. We need all three of you to come with us to the field office to answer some questions. Are we under arrest? Richard demanded. Not at this time, Agent Morrison said. But we strongly advise you to cooperate. We have evidence of wire fraud, forgery, theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be reviewing this case for potential federal charges. Jessica started crying. Madison looked like she'd been turned to stone. Richard tried one last time to bluster his way out of it, but Agent Chen simply handed him a business card and said, "You have the right to contact an attorney. I suggest you do so immediately." As federal agents escorted my sister, stepmother, and uncle out of the restaurant, past the shocked waitstaff and the manager who was clearly trying to decide if he should be calling his own lawyer, I felt Tyler's hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. I honestly didn't know. I felt numb, hollow, like someone had reached into my chest and scooped out everything I'd believed about my family and replaced it with broken glass. Grandmother appeared at my other side. For the first time all evening, she looked old, tired. "Emma, darling, I am so profoundly sorry. I should have been more careful. After the stroke, I wasn't as sharp as I thought I was. I trusted them because they were family, and I should have verified everything they told me." "It's not your fault, Grandma," I said, but my voice sounded distant to my own ears. "You were sick. They took advantage of that. They took advantage of both of us." She pulled me into a hug that smelled like Chanel Gnome, 5, and peppermint. "We'll get through this. We'll get everything back, the necklace, the properties, every penny they stole. And then we're going to rebuild. Better. Smarter." "What happens now?" I asked. The attorney stepped forward. "The FBI will investigate. Given the amount of money involved and the interstate nature of some of the transactions, one of the properties was in Nevada, this will likely be a federal case. If they find sufficient evidence, and based on what I've seen tonight they will, the U.S. attorney will file charges. We're looking at potential prison time for all three of them." Prison. My sister might go to prison. The thought made me feel sick, but it also felt right? Just. I couldn't sort out my emotions. "How long does all this take?" I asked. "Months, potentially over a year for the investigation and trial," the attorney said. "But in the meantime, we'll file civil suits to freeze their assets and begin recovery proceedings. We'll also file injunctions to prevent them from dissipating any remaining funds or assets. First thing Monday morning, I'll have papers filed." The party, such as it was, disbanded. Cousins and aunts and uncles filtered out, some looking shell-shocked, others whispering furiously to each other. Dad pulled me aside near the coat check. "Emma, I didn't know," he said, his eyes red-rimmed. "I swear to God, I didn't know what Richard was doing. If I had known—" "I know, Dad," I said, even though part of me wondered how he couldn't have known. But he looked so broken, so much older than he had this morning, that I couldn't bear to question him right now. "We'll deal with it. I'm divorcing Jessica," he said flatly. "I don't care what it costs, or how messy it gets. I won't be married to someone who would do this to my mother and my daughter." I hugged him, and he clung to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly turned liquid and unstable. Tyler drove me back to my apartment that night. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? At one point, he asked if I wanted to stop for ice cream or coffee or something, but I just shook my head. I needed to be alone. I needed to process. My apartment felt different when I walked in. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, but everything looked unfamiliar. I'd left this morning thinking I was going to my grandmother's birthday party. I was coming home to a different life entirely. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my couch in the dark, staring at my phone. 27 missed calls, 63 text messages. I didn't want to look at any of them, but I did. Most were from cousins and family friends who'd heard about the FBI. A few were from my dad, checking if I'd gotten home okay. 3 were from numbers I didn't recognize. And 5 were from Madison. Against my better judgment, I opened them. Madison. Emma, please call me. I can explain. Madison. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The debt. I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you. Madison. I felt invisible my whole life. Do you know what that's like? To always be second place to your younger sister? To watch everyone love you more? Madison. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't let them send me to prison. I'll pay everything back. I promise. Madison. Fine. Don't respond. But remember this when you're feeling proud of yourself for destroying your family. Remember that you had a choice to forgive and you chose revenge instead. The last message hit me like a punch to the gut. Was that what I was doing? Choosing revenge? Or was I choosing justice? Was there even a difference? I thought about calling her back. I thought about a lot of things. About the Madison who used to read me bedtime stories when I was little. The Madison who'd taught me to ride a bike and defended me from bullies in middle school. The Madison who'd gradually become colder, more critical, more distant as we got older. When had she changed? Or had she always been this way and I'd just been too young to see it? I didn't call her back. Instead, I called my therapist's emergency line and left a message. Then I called Tyler. Hey, he answered immediately. You doing okay? Define okay, I said with a laugh that sounded slightly hysterical. Tyler, did I do the right thing? Should I have just, I don't know, let it go? Tried to work it out privately? Emma, they stole over $2.6 million from your grandmother and from you. They forged your signature on legal documents. Madison threatened me to keep me quiet. This wasn't a family disagreement or a misunderstanding. This was organized fraud that they planned and executed over multiple years. You didn't do anything wrong by telling the truth. But she's my sister. She's a thief who happens to share your DNA, Tyler said bluntly. And I say that as someone who actually likes Madison most of the time, but what she did was inexcusable. You can feel bad about the situation and still know you did the right thing. Both things can be true. After we hung up, I sat there in the dark for a long time, thinking about family and loyalty and what we owe to people who hurt us. Thinking about the little girl I'd been who'd worshipped her big sister, and the woman I was now who'd just watched that sister get investigated by the FBI. The next 6 months were a blur of depositions, interviews, and meetings with lawyers. The investigation moved faster than anyone expected because Tyler's documentation was so thorough and because Madison, in a desperate attempt to reduce her potential sentence, eventually cooperated and gave up everything, including details about how they'd planned it, who'd done what, and where remaining assets were hidden. The necklace was recovered from a private collector in Los Angeles who'd bought it in good faith and was understandably upset to have to return it. The money from the property sales was harder to trace, but forensic accountants eventually tracked it through the shell company to various accounts. About 60% of it was recovered. The rest had been spent on Madison's credit card debt, on a car for Jessica, on Uncle Richard's gambling habit that apparently no one had known about. 8 months after grandmother's birthday dinner, the 3 of them pleaded guilty as part of a deal with the U.S. Attorney's Office. Madison got 3 years in federal prison. Jessica got 18 months. Richard got 5 years because of the extent of his involvement and his gambling problem, which the judge called a continuing danger to anyone who trusted him with financial matters. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. I couldn't. Instead, I took a personal day from work and drove to the beach, where I sat on the sand and watched the waves and tried to figure out how I felt about it all. Grandmother did go. She told me afterward that Madison had made a statement expressing remorse and apologizing to the family. She cried, Grandmother said over tea in her sitting room, the famous sapphire necklace now residing in a safe deposit box at the bank. She cried quite a lot, actually. Said she'd been in therapy and was working on herself and hoped that someday we could forgive her. Do you? I asked. Forgive her? Grandmother was quiet for a long moment, staring into her teacup. I don't know yet, she finally said. Some days I think I might, eventually. Other days I look at what she did and I wonder if I ever really knew her at all. But Emma, and this is important, forgiveness isn't something you owe her. Not now, not ever. What she did to you, to us, that's her burden to carry. You don't have to help her carry it. Over time, grandmother completely restructured her estate plan. She set up trusts with independent trustees and professional management. The jewelry was cataloged and insured and placed in secure storage. She'd already promised me the sapphire necklace, and she meant to keep that promise. But now it would be held in trust until her death, managed by people who had no personal stake in it. She also completely rewrote her will. The properties that were recovered were sold, and the money was placed in educational trusts for my future children and Tyler's future children. Madison would receive nothing beyond what she was legally entitled to as a direct heir under state law, and even that would be tied up in restrictions. Money, grandmother told me one day, doesn't build character, it reveals it. Madison showed me who she was, and I believe her. As for me, I threw myself into my work. I got a promotion 6 months after the sentencing, senior marketing manager, with a corner office and a team of my own. I started dating again, carefully, with the help of my therapist to work through my trust issues. I had regular dinners with grandmother and Tyler, the three of us forming a smaller, more honest family unit. I never responded to Madison's letters from prison. She wrote me dozens of them in the first year, each one following the same pattern. Justification, then apology, then anger that I wouldn't forgive her, then back to apology. My therapist suggested I could read them if I wanted closure, but I found that I didn't need closure from Madison. I needed it from myself. The hardest part wasn't the anger or the betrayal. It was grieving the sister I'd thought I had. The version of Madison who'd existed in my head, complicated, sometimes difficult, but ultimately family. That person was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed. Maybe I'd created her from childhood memories and hope and the desperate desire to believe that family meant something. But I learned something important through all of it. Family is the people who show up for you, not the people who share your last name. Tyler showed up. Grandmother showed up. My dad, working through his own shock and divorce, showed up. They were my family in the ways that mattered. 2 years after that birthday dinner, I got engaged. Not to David God, no. To Marcus, a software engineer I'd met at a professional conference who made me laugh and called me on my bullshit and understood that sometimes I needed to process things quietly before I could talk about them. When I told grandmother, she smiled that knowing smile of hers. "I suppose you'll want the necklace for the wedding," she said. I thought about it. The Cartier sapphire that had caused so much pain and revealed so much truth. Part of me never wanted to see it again. But another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger over the past 2 years, saw it differently now. "Actually," I said, "I'd like to wear it. Not because of family tradition or because it's expected, but because Madison tried to steal my future, and she failed. Every time I wear that necklace, I'll remember that I survived. That I'm stronger than her worst impulses. That I didn't let her destroy me." Grandmother reached across the table and took my hand. "You are absolutely your grandmother's granddaughter," she said, pride evident in her voice. "Your great-grandmother would have loved you." The wedding was small and private, just the people who mattered. Tyler was in the wedding party. Dad walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes, whispering that he was proud of me. Grandmother sat in the front row, watching with that sharp gaze that missed nothing, and I wore the sapphire necklace. It caught the light as I said my vows, this piece of family history that had nearly torn us apart and then, in a strange way, helped us rebuild into something more authentic, something honest. Madison sent a card from prison. I didn't open it for 3 days, and when I finally did, it was short. "Congratulations, Emma. I mean that. You deserved a happy ending. No justifications this time. No apologies or anger. Just that." I didn't write back. But I also didn't throw the card away. I tucked it into a drawer, a small acknowledgement that healing isn't linear, and forgiveness isn't required. But grace is something we can choose to extend, even from a distance. Life moved forward. I learned to trust again, though it came slowly. Marcus and I bought a house. Grandmother remained healthy and sharp, throwing herself into charity work and making sure that her revised estate plan was airtight. Tyler launched his own tech startup, and I watched him succeed with pride. And sometimes, late at night, I thought about that birthday dinner, about the moment when grandmother asked about the necklace, and everything unraveled, about how one question changed everything. revealed everything, destroyed and rebuilt everything. Have you ever been betrayed by the people closest to you? Have you ever watched your family implode over dinner while federal agents took notes? Have you ever had to choose between loyalty and truth, knowing that either choice would cost you something precious? I have, and I survived it. We all did, in our different ways. The lesson, if there is one, is this: betrayal will show you who people really are. Justice sometimes arrives messy and incomplete, but personal growth that completes the victory. Madison chose theft, Jessica chose complicity, Richard chose greed, I chose truth, and grandmother chose accountability. And in the end, we built something better from the ruins. A smaller family, yes, a more cautious one, but an honest one, real. Built on foundations that couldn't be shaken by jealousy or entitlement, or the simple human failure of wanting more than you've earned. The sapphire necklace sits in my jewelry box now, in the house Marcus and I share. I don't wear it often, it's not really an everyday piece. But when I do, I remember. I remember betrayal and survival. I remember that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, but choices do. I remember that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same thing. And I remember that woman I was before that birthday dinner, a little naive, a little too trusting, willing to overlook red flags because they were family. She's gone now. In her place is someone stronger. Someone who knows that love without boundaries is just another word for being used. Someone who understands that you can't set yourself on fire to keep others warm, even if they're family, especially if they're family. Grandmother likes to say that the universe has a way of revealing truth when the timing is right. I don't know if I believe in the universe having intentions, but I do know this. That question about the necklace, asked at exactly the right moment in front of exactly the right people, saved me from years more of deception. It ripped off the Band-Aid fast and painful, but clean. And sometimes, that's the greatest gift, the painful truth that sets you free.